So I'm here sitting with my friend Kate Daudy, one of the fellows at Columbia's Institute for Ideas and Imagination. And my name is Megan Ruppel, and I'm one of the graduate students in Columbia's Masters in History and Literature. So today we're going to talk with Kate a little bit about your projects this year and some of the themes that have been coming up in our conversations off camera, bringing them now to the wider community. So first of all, happy birthday, Kate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'm dressed as some honey today to celebrate my birthday, wearing two rugs that I found here in this beautiful institute where there is everything that anyone could need, including rugs for when you're feeling cold on your birthday.
Yeah. I was thinking that too, that there's everything we need. And we have sort of routines and when we sit down together, making tea, getting cozy, kind of finding our subjects as we go. I feel like when we start off, often one of us is chewing on something or working on something beforehand and sort of comes in and says, oh, I've just come from this, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. So we were talking just before the camera started rolling about your morning and how you started the morning and celebrations and traditions in our families around birthdays. Now your project this year with the Institute is about honey, and I wanted to talk a little more about where that interest started. You told me a few weeks back that you first started paying attention to honey with a family honey collection. Can you say more about that?
Well, my interest in honey started before the family honey collection because it's a sort of manifestation of my long-standing love of honey, which I think started with identifying very strongly with Pooh Bear as a child. And when we started to have children, I had already started collecting honeys from all of our travels and all over the world. And everybody knows that if they want to give me a present, they give me some honey. And so we ended up having this really pretty extensive honey library with maybe between, at any one time, like, because we eat a lot of honey, maybe 200 or 300 different kinds of honey from all over the world in this big bunch of shelves in the kitchen. And so when the children were learning to talk, I have got 3 children, we started to think that it was interesting to teach them about the wonderful things in life with honey, and also talking about and comparing things that are quite similar, so like all different kinds of honey, is more fun and more challenging maybe than expressing the difference between a glass of water and a hamburger. And so we used to get maybe 5 or 6 different kinds of honey and a bunch of spoons in the middle of the table, and then we'd all sit around and taste the different honeys, and we'd have to think of 5 words to express the way we felt about this honey or the way that the honey made us feel. So that included, like, of course we could describe the actual honey, the color of it, whatever. And it became, I suppose, an expression of my personal feeling that we're surrounded by the sublime every day, and that it's quite a good idea, if you want to be happy, to kind of look for it. And so honey kind of ended up kind of becoming more and more a feature of our everyday life.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of subtle gradations between different honeys, I like what you said about it. It's more interesting to make a comparison between 2 things that are similar than things that are completely different.
Yes.
And that you're getting your children to start to tune into those subtle differences.
For sure, yeah.
Do you have any favorite honeys from the collection? Any memorable ones?
Well, I've got some recent pretty special honeys from Bolivia. One of the honeys that I particularly loved was from Madagascar. So we went to Madagascar many years ago when we just had one of my children, and I was looking for honey everywhere, and honey in Madagascar is extremely expensive and difficult to come by because at the time they didn't have a tradition of beekeeping, which actually is the same in Bolivia, where I just came back from. They only started beekeeping like 10 or 15 years ago as a part of any kind of agricultural practice. So before that, people would just go find a beehive and light a big bonfire next to the beehive everybody goes and has a picnic, all the family, and they smoke out the bees with their big barbecue, not barbecue, like bonfire. And then, everybody all at once like rushes in on the hive and totally destroys the hive, but taking all the honey away and bringing it to their house, which is how they used to do things in Bolivia. And in Madagascar, I found a convent and an old nun who was supposed to have a supply of honey that she would give to people as a medicine when they were not well, or if they'd had a cut or a graze, something quite radical wrong with you. This kind of mega magic medicine was this black honey they would go and get from the forests. And so we found a guy who was happy to go and climb a tree and bring down some of this incredible, it was literally almost black honey that was one of the most exotic honeys that I've ever had. I also really there's so many honeys, but one of the honeys that I brought back just now from Bolivia was from little beehives that are made. So there's these little tiny bees that are almost the size of mosquitoes, and they build beehives that are maybe the size, I guess, is between the size of a green bean and a plum. And you can take the honey out with a syringe, and this, because everything's so little, it's like Dolly World. And then this honey is supposed to be able to cure cataracts. It's got sort of incredible magic properties for your health. And I brought some back to get it analysed at Cambridge University, which is also now slightly involved in this project, where there's a lab with this wonderful professor who's looking into bees as well. So there's a lot of people who've kind of connected into this bee project sort of along the way, which is so exciting, because I've got maybe 4 different kinds of honey that I can bring to him that he's really excited to see, because these honeys, like, they're so rich and rare and difficult to come by. I also found some honey, from a cactus reserve where they have cacti that flower between 6 and 8 weeks a year. And there's this guy, I went to his house and met him, and he has cactus honey from this cactus reserve that is so beautiful. It's I was reading last night about ancient Chinese medicine book, and they were describing a particular sort of honey that is as smooth as jade. And this cactus honey is as white and smooth as jade. It's just beautiful. And I had some for my breakfast this morning.
Well, I feel like I could go in so many different directions from what you said. But I think actually the directions I want to go into are connected to each other. So let me try to piece them out. First of all, you mentioned your collaborations. I'm always struck when we talk about your art practice by your collaborations with scientists, whether it's analyzing the honey or working together on a physics problem or math problem through art. Then, starting with the Madagascar honey, I'm struck by your taste for adventure that comes through in your discussion of honey. Your excitement about finding something that you have to go this way and then up that way, and then you find a person who can lead you here, and you climb a tree, or you pull, and these exciting images too of like the syringe or the cactus, and these things that come adjacent to the honey, different animals or different ecosystems or different communities that sort of surround the honey. Yeah. So when we talk about honey, I feel like we're often talking about honey in context, honey and the systems of making or the systems of harvesting honey. That it seems like a connective tissue or something that brings together a lot of different things.
Yeah, well, the honey is really a prism through which I want to look at how we as human beings can learn to better engage in dialogue and conversation with one another. And so it's really a project about peace and harmony.
It's funny that you call it a prism, because we've got your honey windows here at the Reid Hall. Kate's introduction to Reid Hall, or your first collaboration with the community here, was a commission to design these honey windows that are now hanging on the second floor passageway over the entrance. And they're these sort of circular slices of honey encased in glass and wood that change color and texture with time and temperature, and sort of filter light in these dynamic ways. And you mentioned conversation, and I was suddenly brought to the memory of sitting with a classmate behind these honey windows, sitting on the window bench there, and talking and looking through it. And as the conversation sort of tilts and changes, you're watching this honey sort of move through space at its own pace. And
yeah, those honey windows was so fun to make.
What was the process like?
And I was so happy that Columbia commissioned them, because it was just kind of an idea, and then suddenly where they were. I wanted them to be like stained glass windows, because part of our experience of looking at honey at breakfast in the mornings was looking at the world upside down through gloops of honey and looking at all the color, and also when you have so much honey, which we do. God, I feel like I'm showing off. Well, I mean, I am showing off.
Yeah, your collection. It's the joy of having a collection is showing it off.
yeah, maybe. Yeah. Is seeing how the honey changes in texture over time, and sometimes all of the honey crystallizes and moves. And I thought it would be really interesting to make a big point of that as an artwork. So each of those honey windows, they're almost like double glazed windows. The wooden frame is from a fallen tree in a park in South London. And it's particularly beautiful wood, I think. And then we poured quite a lot of honey in those windows. There's like 8 kilos of honey that we poured through a special little hole in the top. And over time they are changing, and we can use them as a means of looking through the world. No, I find them to be a kind of formal and informal way of measuring time, and the weather, because they change in the weather.
I'm curious about that. I don't want to push you, but if meeting resistance in your own kind of, well, what do I want to talk about? Do I want to describe this, or do I want to shift towards this? Again, to me, that seems like a really exciting space of the project. I feel like when we talk about your work here as a fellow, you're always dancing between two different states, the same way that, not to be cute about it, but the same way that the honey can change a state or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is, of course, this research that I'm doing here at Columbia is like a year of research for this project, which will be a visual project in a museum in Spain. So I'm going to make all the artwork next year, and then I'm doing the research and working out what will be the component of sort of public engagement as part of that while I'm here. So while I'm here, I'm going to be doing a series of podcasts, and a few of these filmed
sit downs,
and I'm going to also write quite a lot of text for the catalogue, I guess. And then next year I'm going to be building a house out of honey and doing a whole load of sort of artwork looking at this topic of harmony and peace that will be expressed in this medium. I'm using honey as a material, really. And I like the idea of using honey as a material. I think it's
and that's but I like what you're doing with the podcast too, and these conversations, and that you're sort of setting up a lot of different possible interactions.
Of course, and but part of it is going to be we're in the middle of organizing a honey tasting for the fellows here with some of the honey that I've brought back from abroad, and we're also going to get some mead, and I'm making a perfume looking at with one of the great noses of the world, who's this woman called Eleanor Massini, and we're making a perfume that will express the energy of honey. So it won't smell of honey, but it will express the kind of spirit of accidental magic that honey is for me.
Yeah, it reminds me of your talismans sewn into your clothes. perfume. So what else are you going to do with honey this year?
We're going to, we found a guy with a weightless vacuum box up in Nottingham, and we are going to go and put honey inside his weightless vacuum box and some microphones on the outside of the box that will make the box, I suppose, vibrate. And we're going to read poems to the honey and see what shapes the honey makes according to which words and which poems in particular. So we found a guy who's got a good enough camera to film that, and a guy who's got a good enough,
found a guy who
a good enough microphone to record the glooping of the honey inside the weightless vacuum box. And so we're going to make these beautiful concrete poems, I suppose, except they're not going to be concrete poems. They're going to be honey poems. We found a way to freeze honey and use it as a musical instrument. And so we're going to be working on that. And each of these projects is with just the most extraordinary scientists. I'm going to go to NASA in June and look at how we can communicate between planets, since this is a project about communication and dialogue. So I'm going to go and spend 2 weeks at Cape Canaveral looking at how we can sort of bond with exterior forces and things outside of our experience. What else am I going to do? I'm doing a series of drawings.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's reminding me of things that your neighbor George Lewis, another fellow here at the Institute, is doing with composing music with artificial intelligence. That it's like you're composing art with honey as another intelligence in the project with you. What is the shape that honey makes in response to this poem, or what is the sound that honey makes as an instrument? It's not artificial intelligence. It's one of the more organic intelligences out there. But
totally.
I like that you're thinking of it as an interlocutor, as a participant
but also it changes. Honey is quite interesting because it changes state, but it doesn't change. It doesn't go off at all. So, for example, Alexander the Great was embalmed in honey, and his funeral cortege had Alexander the Great shaped coffin with which was just basically like a sort of giant pod in which he had been embalmed in honey, and it was all made out of gold, and then it got lost, and it was transported across whichever part of the world. According to some people, he was buried in Siwa.
Frank Herbert wishes he could come up with something like that for Dune.
And his coffin, his body embalmed in honey, was carried across the nation by 64 white cattle. I just love all these sort of glamorous honey stories.
Yeah, but so this is what we're talking about. You're making sort of modern versions of these sort of to me, insane interactions with honey, but it's something that we've been doing for a long time as a species, and you're carrying on that tradition.
Exactly. And like Tutankhamun was buried with honey, and honey when his tomb was burgled. It was burgled twice, actually. The first time the people came into his tomb, they just kind of scoped it out. They dug a hole and went in to see what there was. But one of the things that the thieves stole from inside Tutankhamun's tomb was honey, and there's a pot of honey in the tomb that has got like kind of, I won't say paw marks, but like the thief kind of like put his hand in the honey pot and went like that and ate it, and then like smeared it on the walls, and so there's like traces of stolen honey inside the tomb of Tutankhamun, which was as precious as a lot of other things at that time. And I think that's what's so magical about honey, is that I suppose I don't know, I was talking with Sam from the IT department, who was saying that he prefers Nutella to honey. And I was like, Sam, you're completely wrong, man. Honey's great. Anyway, so if I can convert Sam to liking honey with my exhibition, then I will be very, very happy. But in the meantime, it's a very useful conduit for inviting people from every walk of life, every political persuasion, peacemakers, doctors, diplomats, mums, kids, like getting people to talk about what do they mean when they think about a real dialogue, a real conversation, and how can we build a more harmonious future, which I think is something that is worth thinking about now. Communication, peace, and honey is a good way to is a good tool through which to look at all the change that's going on right now in the world, I think.
Well, good luck with it. I can't wait to see what some of these conversations bring about. So I guess we'll finish there, but thank you for watching and listening. And
thank you, Megan, very much for your questions that send me into a spin.
Well, and happy birthday. Have a good rest of your day today.
Thank you.